kind of back on topic. I've just recorded loads of videos. I don't know what I've recorded. If I'll upload them or not. They have finally found a suspect for the babes in the woods case. Which was how many years ago? At least 20. And it set me thinking. It set me thinking about the similarities between their case and the case of, I'm sorry, I don't remember their surnames, Holly and Jessica. The two little girls who were murdered, and Ian Huntley was convicted of their murder. Lots of similarities, it seems to me. But I've also just been watching the Mark Dutroux documentaries. What is this with paedophiles taking little girls in twos? Even if they do have voracious sexual appetites and depraved and unnatural sexual appetites, no one will convince me that it's natural to have sex with a child. Even if they do, isn't 2 at a time just a bit greedy? And you've got then the trouble of restraining one while you do what you want with the other. It seems odd, to say the least, and yet they seem to quite often go in twos. The babes in the wood, Holly and Jessica, Mark Dutroux, they were pairs. Was a pair rescued alive, Sabine and, oh dear God, I haven't forgotten her name, I think I have. Letitia, somebody? Those two were rescued alive. 2 who fascinate me, horrific, were 8 years old, kidnapped I think at the same time, and I actually believed at first that they had died of starvation, until I heard the details, which don't add up in any way, shape or form. The police were alerted to the fact that it probably was Mark Dutroux within 10 days of the kidnap of those 2 little 8-year-old girls. Allegedly 4 months later they died of starvation. And yet, Mark Dutroux's account of events was that he had found one just dead and one barely alive, dying in his arms. After 4 months in a cold, damp cellar with no food and no water. It defies belief they couldn't possibly have lived anywhere near that long. I can testify personally to the fact that you're extremely close to death after a fortnight without food. Without any food, that is. And you'd die an awful lot faster if you didn't have water either. I survived with little drops of water here and there. Completely impossible, as the mother of one of them pointed out, for them to survive 4 months in those conditions, in winter, in an unheated cellar, with no sustenance. You'd think they'd freeze to death, and in fact that would have been quite merciful, comparatively. And the chances of their being alive and just dying as he happened to turn up, just not possible. But it went further than that. The parents weren't allowed to see the bodies. Well, I thought, well, that's fair enough, really, because, you know, A, they're not going to look very good if they're starved to death, and B, they'd been buried. They would. Am I getting confused? Yeah, they had been buried. Well, they would be decomposed. You wouldn't be able to recognise them anyway. And my God, would you really want to see your child like that? I thought it was quite reasonable until they interviewed, I don't know, were they police officers involved in the case? Who maintained the most extraordinary things. One being that those two little girls survived for those 4 months. And they'd not taken DNA. So what you've got is decomposing corpses that no one is allowed to see. Well, makes you wonder, doesn't it, actually, whether what had actually really happened to those little girls, since police protection in this case is incredibly obvious. Just listen to one or two of the documentaries. What had possibly, conceivably happened to those two little girls was that they had been moved on to somewhere else in the paedophile ring, and probably did eventually die, being 8. But so there's that, and there's this penchant for taking little girls in twos. Why? Well, I would have thought clearly it's to service more than one man. You know, okay, a little girl is going to be fairly easy to restrain. But what? Sorry, I hate to go into the gory details, but really? You're going to do what you want to do with one and then kill her and then go on and do the same to the other? I would have thought you'd be a bit tired by that time, to be honest. You know, could you really rape and murder one little girl and then turn around and do the same to the other? Or what do you do? Do you sort of keep her for a while until you've regained your strength? Why? Why 2 at a time? And in the Mark True case, it was all 2 at a time. The 2 who were rescued, the 2 who were supposed to have starved to death after 4 months. Well, after 4 months, and yet they were still alive just in time. And another 2 who I think were actually much older, about 18. And it was said that they'd been drugged and buried alive. Equally horrific. But 2 at a time, 2 at a time, 2 at a time. I'm trying to think of other cases. It does seem to be a kind of recurring theme. Although the Moors murderers, I believe, took their victims 1 at a time. Actually, that would take me on to a whole... Well, it's not a different topic, it's the same topic, but...